I don't know if I'm ready for this. This is gonna be a long video, just a warning. I'm gonna try to go as quickly as I can, but it's gonna be long. Welcome back to my channel. It has been a while. This is a very random video for my channel, but I read 50 books in 2020. I can't believe it. A lot of people have been asking me like what I read, how I read so much, what I like to read, my favorite books, blah blah blah. So I just figured I would kind of compile everything into a little video. I'm gonna try to give a little like blurb about the book. I'll tell my rating. So I can't believe we're here. It's January 1st, it's 2021. 2020 is finally over. But yeah, I'm excited. I got my stacks here, so let's just get into it. Okay, I'm trying to be as organized as possible. I have my Goodreads here with the dates that I read, and I wrote some little sentences just to keep me on track with the books. So there was two main ways that I was reading this year, which was just physical books, paperback hard copies, sometimes ebooks, not very often, and audiobooks is something that I got into this year. I'm not usually an audiobook person. I never was. In my mind, I think of audiobook and I'm like, that's cheating, but I am team audiobook. It is not cheating. You're still absorbing the knowledge of a book. You're still reading even if you're not physically looking at the book. Anywho, the main things that I used for audiobooks, I used Hoopla and I used Libby because you can get the books for free through your library card. I tried Audible, but I only did it for a book that I had to read for a book club that I did not like. I was trying to read the physical copy and it just was not happening, so I couldn't get it on the library app, so I got Audible for the free trial month and just listened to that book and like, yeah, so those are the two main ways that I was reading, audiobooks and physical books. So yeah, let's start with the first book. So first book that I read was Hidden Bodies. This is the second part to the book You. Lots of people have heard of the television series that is on Netflix now. In my opinion, the first season of You was excellent. Second season, they did not do the book justice. I enjoyed this book. What did I rate this? I gave this book a 3 out of 5 stars. So in part 2, in Hidden Bodies, Joe, the main character, moves to LA and he finds a new love interest, or like obsession, I guess, because it's Joe. It's similar to You in the same kind of like narrative, and the way that he acts is just a little bit more extreme and a little bit more violent, I guess I'll say. Definitely recommend the book over season 2 of the show though. Season 2 of the show was just bad. Okay, the next book that I read, this was actually, I think this was the only ebook that I read this year, and it was Bone Cold by Erica Spindler. Erica Spindler is one of my favorite authors. She is such a good thriller writer. It was about a woman who gets kidnapped when she was 13, and her kidnapper is like a madman and he cuts off her pinky finger. That's like very prominent in knowing in the story, and then she like changes her name and moves on. She's a thriller writer, like she writes thrillers for her job, and then 23 years later she's living in New Orleans and she starts getting stalked, and these letters show up at her house, and she thinks it's like the killers, and then when she goes to the police and kind of tells them what happens and like what happened to her, it actually ends up that there is a killer now. Like they found a body and the pinky finger was severed, so the two are connected, and it's kind of like the story and how the killer's come back, or has he come back, or is it a copycat, or is it something else? I don't know. Erica Spindler books are always really good. I rated this one 4 out of 5 stars. It was fantastic. I'm already out of breath and I've only talked about 2 books. Okay, the next book. This is now one of my favorite books of all time. I'm the Messenger. This book holds such a special place in my heart. I love this book so much. It was so good. I recommend it to literally everyone. It was just so good. The story was so good. It's about our main character. His name's Ed Kennedy. His name, sorry, is named Ed Kennedy. He's a cab driver. He doesn't really have anything like going in his life. Like he doesn't really have much of a future. And one day he inadvertently stops a bank robbery, and then that's when the first ace arrives. Protect the diamonds, survive the clubs, dig deep through the spades, and then feel the hearts. So each card shows up at his house and they have different names or different addresses or like different hints as to what he has to do, and he has to kind of figure out what he has to do and who he has to help throughout the book. and it was just really good. I don't know, I really loved it. I'm doing no justice at explaining what it's about, but yeah, he kind of gets like chosen to care, and he's like helping and hurting when he needs to, but then like the one question is, who's behind this? Like, who sent the aces? Like, who is doing this? Who's making him do this? Yeah, very good. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. Obviously, it's now one of my favorite books. I want to reread it this year. Loved. I remember getting this book when I was in Paris in 2017. I don't know why I got this. It's Erotic Poems by E.E. Cummings. I got it at Shakespeare & Co. It was just a poetry book. Like, it was good, I guess. I don't know, it was like very sexual, but yeah, I don't really have much to say about it. So that book there. Oh, I gave it 3 stars, I think. Yeah, that's what I said here. Honestly, I don't really remember it that much, so I don't have a lot to say about it. The next book I read was The Last Black Unicorn by Tiffany Haddish. I remember laughing out loud reading this book. This book was hilarious. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. It's just like a memoir kind of about her life and coming up in comedy, and she's just so funny. I love Tiffany Haddish. This book was hilarious. Highly recommend this one, and one I read last year, actually, Dear Girls by Ali Wong, 2 of my favorites. This was so funny. The next book that I read, this book took me a really long time to get through, and probably shouldn't have been my first novel by this author. That's what everybody told me anyways. But the next book that I read was The Outsider by Stephen King. This book, oh, this book. It had me hooked in the beginning. I remember reading it, and in probably like the first half, I was like, okay, this is good. Like, this is spooky. It was scaring me a little bit, and then it just got kind of like dumb, for lack of a better word. This is about an 11-year-old boy gets murdered, and there's an eyewitness that says that it was the town's little league coach. His name's Terry Maitland. So then Terry gets like processed and arrested, and there's DNA evidence that says that he was there also, so he pretty much did the crime. But the thing is that he has an alibi. He wasn't in town the day that the murder happened, so he couldn't have done it. But there's an eyewitness, and his DNA is at the crime scene, so it's like, can he be in 2 places at once? Like, what's going on? And that's kind of where it gets like this like monster kind of thing happening. Yeah, she wasn't my favorite. She definitely was not a favorite of the year. I gave it 3 stars because it was still entertaining, but I would not pick it up again, and it kind of threw me off of Stephen King. Even though this was the first Stephen King book that I read, I would like to read another one by him, but not this one. Okay, next book that I read was Big Little Lies by Liane Moriarty. This follows 3 moms and a murder. A tragic accident happens. Is it just parents behaving badly? Who knows? But one thing's for sure, somebody is dead. So throughout the book, you're kind of figuring out what happened and how the women's lives kind of intersect. This is really good. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. I don't really have much else to say about it. I read it because I wanted to watch the show, and I still have not watched the show, so Big Little Lies. Next, I read The Wives by Taryn Fisher. I thoroughly enjoyed this book. I have seen some mixed reviews, but I actually really liked this one. It's about a woman who is sharing her husband. It's kind of like a polygamist thriller. So she's one of the wives, and there's 2 other ones. They don't know each other's names. They don't know anything about each other, but they know that each other exists. Like, they know that their husband has 2 other wives. So this is told in this perspective of one of the wives, and then one night she comes across a phone number for one of the other wives and her name, and kind of starts investigating the other wives who are like taking up her husband's time. And there was a pretty crazy twist at the end, so that's all I'm gonna say about that. But this was very good. Yeah, I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. Very good thriller, very entertaining, super quick read. Like, I think I read it in a couple days. So The Wives. I am getting so out of breath. I've never filmed a video like this before, and I've never talked this much. So this is probably gonna be all over the place, but bear with me. We still got a lot to get through. Okay, the next book that I read was Adultery by Paulo Coelho. I didn't really like this book. I read it at a time when I was reading a massive book and I just needed a break from it. So I picked this up. I read it in a night. It was okay. I think I had really high expectations for it because I really love The Alchemist, so I thought this was going to be really great. Essentially, it's just about a woman who wants to cheat on her husband. Like, that's pretty much what the whole story is about. yeah, I really don't have much to say about this. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars, but I definitely should have given it like 2 because, yeah, I don't know. It just wasn't for me. Like, I didn't really like it, so. The next book that I read, I'm embarrassed. So the next book that I read put me into a little bit of a whirlwind, put me into a little bit of a spiral, if you will. The next book that I read was After by Anna Todd. A friend of mine that I worked with told me I had to read these books, and this was in quarantine. Like, I think we're getting into like the thick of when quarantine started, and I was reading a lot. So my friend told me I had to read the After series. It was so good, and like, I had heard of it because Loki used to be a big One Direction fan, and if you don't know, the After books are based on like a One Direction fan fiction. So she told me I had to read these books. They were so good. They were so addicting. Well, she was not wrong. This is an addiction. Like, it is sickening how obsessed I was with this series and these books. So it's a trash love story, a trash toxic love story. It's terrible. These books are terrible, but they're just so good. Like, they're just those books you can just drink up and just read, and you don't want to put it down. They're so bad. So bad, but I still gave it 4 out of 5 stars because it was highly entertaining. I was obsessed with the series. I could not wait to finish it. So yeah. After. Oh my god. Next book that I read was also one of my favorites of the year, and that is The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. This is a big book. This is the longest book that I read this year. It's just over 1,000 pages. I think like 1,092, but like, look at that font. This is like a Bible. This is the start of an epic fantasy series. It's a Stormlight archive. I think it's gonna be 12 books. There's 4 out right now. So this first one follows 4 main characters. I'm gonna read it off of my phone just so that I don't like mess it up and that I get it actually right. So we follow a surgeon who is forced to forsake healing to fight in a brutal war. Like, this book is centered around a war pretty much. An assassin who weeps as he kills, a liar, she's a young woman. She wears like a scholar's mantle, but it hides behind the heart of a thief. And we follow a prince whose eyes have opened to the past, and his thirst for war is kind of drying up. That is the smallest of nutshells of what goes on in this book. This is an epic fantasy, so there's a lot happening. It's slow, not slow because it's very entertaining, but to get into it because there's a lot of world building, there's a lot of information, there's a magic system, there's different creatures, different like places, so it's a lot to get into. But once you're into it, like, oh, I still think about this book, and when I finished it, it was all I could think about, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, I need to know what's gonna happen, I need to know what's going on. So yeah, amazing. This book was so good. Oh. If you read fantasy, you definitely need to read this book. I know it's intimidating, I know it's scary because it's massive, but it was so worth it. It was so good. Definitely one of my favorite books of the year. Okay, so I'm gonna do the next 3 books that I read all in one, because it's the rest of the After series. I read all of these. I think I read the entire series in April. I read all of these ones back to back because I had them all. I only read After first because I didn't have the rest of the series. So this is just a continuation of the trash romance that we were obsessed with. I don't have much to say about this. I think that I gave, okay, I'll tell you my ratings for all of these. So for After We Collided, I gave 4 stars. After We Fell, I gave 4 stars as well. I think this was my favorite of the series. I can't remember, but I think that this one was my favorite. This is the biggest one too. This is like 800 pages. And I finished it in like 2.5 days because I could not put it down. Like, and After Ever Happy, this is like the last one. This one was just kind of like, it felt like very forced and just like, okay, I need to finish the series. I just need to wrap it up. Like, let me just throw something together. Like, yeah, I don't know. I gave it 3 stars. It was okay. It was a good wrap up. I liked that it was shorter because at this point I was just sick of the series and I just did not care about Hardin and Tessa anymore, but I just needed to know what was going on. So thankful that this one was short. And that's all I'm going to say about the After series, and I'm never going to talk about it again because it ruined my life. Speaking of series that ruined our lives, the next series that I read during quarantine, I didn't read them all in order, so we'll get to the rest of them later, but the next book that I read was A Court of Thorns and Roses. Oh, this precious baby. Oh my goodness. Another book. If you love fantasy and you haven't read this, you need to read this. I let this sit on my shelf for way too long and I'm so mad at myself that I did. But yeah, this story is about a human girl who she has to provide for her family. She is hunting one day and she sees a wolf. So she ends up killing the wolf, bringing it back to her cabin. But then this fairy, is he a lord? I think he's a lord. I don't know. This fairy, his name's Tamlin, shows up at her door and he's like, you killed one of my men. You need to come back with me. Like, you need to repay this debt, blah, 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 blah. So then she ends up getting pulled into his world and all this like magic and fairies and romance and angst, and oh, it was just so good. Oh my gosh, so wonderful. This is another one that I flew through. Oh my gosh, these were addicting. Like, this series has my heart and I can't wait for the next book to come out. But yeah, A Court of Thorns and Roses, so good. So good. I want to reread these two. Oh, that was a 5-star. I gave that one a 5-star as well. The next book that I read was Caraval by Stephanie Garber. I absolutely adored this series. This is a trend. I actually got really lucky with most of the books that I read this year. I thoroughly enjoyed a lot of them, so I am very thankful for that, because I know a lot of people, when they read a lot of books, there's a lot of duds, but I tried to be really careful with what I was picking and tried to pick things that I knew I was going to enjoy. This is a fantasy novel. This is a YA fantasy. It's about two sisters and they want to go to this festival called Caraval. Carnival, essentially, and there's a game when you're in it. Like, when you go to Caraval, you can either play or just be a watcher kind of thing. So the sisters decide one of them wants to play, the other one doesn't, but then they get separated when they go to Caraval. So then the other sister ends up needing to play in order to find her sister. There's some drama, there's some romance, there's some mystery, there's lots of magic, everything that I love in a YA fantasy novel. Yeah, I feel like I'm doing a terrible job at explaining all of these books, but you can always look them up on Goodreads if I'm doing a trash job. I just feel like I need to rave about them and tell you how much that I love them. I gave this 5 stars. Wonderful, loved it. Next was The Bear and the Nightingale. I was on a fantasy tip for a while. Fantasy is one of my favorite genres to read, but this was like all I was reading. I could only read fantasy. So The Bear and the Nightingale, this one is about, it's kind of like Russian folklore. It's about a family who lives in like the woods somewhere in Russia, and there's this winter demon, this frost demon, that the family, you have to leave like offerings kind of for him in order to protect the land and make sure the crops grow. The mother ends up passing away. So then the father goes and gets a new bride. So his stepmother comes and she forbids the family from doing any of these rituals. She thinks it's silly, she thinks it's wasteful. So she forbids them from doing this. So then all of this stuff starts going wrong. And the story is based on one of the daughters. I'm not gonna try to pronounce her name. It's like Russian, so I'm not even gonna try. But it's based on one of the daughters who kind of has some like magic in her. So we follow her and trying to fix the problems, I guess, that are caused because the frost demon is not happy anymore. I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. This was very whimsical, but yeah, very whimsical. I have the second book somewhere on here, so I'll get to that eventually. But yeah, The Bear and the Nightingale. I read a lot of very popular YA this year, I would say. A lot of very popular books that I should have gotten to years ago that I just didn't. The next book that I read was 6 of Crows. Give me Kaz Brekker or give me death. Like, I love this man. This was essentially about a big heist. A group of like 6 kind of outcasts. They're like thieves, and one of them's a sharpshooter, and one of them, she's kind of like a gypsy and has powers. So there is a magic system in this. They get a deal essentially that they can pull off a really big heist and get a really big payout from it. So that's what the book is centered around, is the heist and the team. But there's some like a little smidgen, little sprinkling of romance in there. Lots of magic, lots of action. This is a super action-packed book. Oh my gosh, why am I getting so out of breath and like I can't talk? I'm just excited. The Crows, I gave 4 stars. Really enjoyed it, super fun. Why is it always the worst to like end a sentence talking about something, you know? Do you know what I mean? I'm just like, and yeah. Okay, the next book that I read, oh, okay, A Court of Mist and Fury. If you have read this series, then you know about this. You know about this bad boy right here. I I don't even have words for this book, okay? This was a 5 out of 5, clearly. I'm not really gonna say much about it because I don't wanna spoil it if you haven't read the series. If you had read the series, you know what I'm talking about with this book. Fantastic. Okay, and I am doing these in order, but I could have done them in like groups of series because I read a lot of series this year, but the next book that I read was Legendary, which is part 2 of the Caraval series. So we're still following the sisters. It's told in the other sisters' perspective. Actually, that's pretty much all I'm going to say because again, I don't want to spoil anything for the series, but look at this cover. These are some of my favorite books. Like, they're so pretty. But yeah, equally as fun, equally as entertaining. I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. Continuing on with the series, A Court of Wings and Ruin. This was my absolute favorite out of the Court of Mist and Fury. Oh my gosh. A Court of Thorns and Roses series. This was my favorite book. I loved it. It was amazing. I'm not going to spoil it because you need to read the series. Just read it. Trust me, you'll love it. But yeah, this was my favorite out of the series. Super entertaining. Very action-packed. I think that's why I liked it so much, because there was a lot of action and a lot of romance in it as well. So yeah. 5 out of 5 stars for me for A Court of Wings and Ruin. Okay, and then to finish off the Caraval series, I read Finale, which was the last book in the series. Again, I really enjoyed this book. It was such a great little series to read, super fun. I loved the kind of sisterhood aspect of it too, that it was 2 sisters and they kind of were willing to do anything for each other. I really, really loved that. So, this isn't called Caraval. I feel like I'm saying that differently every time I say it too. I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. I would probably give the entire series a 4 out of 5 stars. Okay, stepping away from series for a minute. Well, this is a series, but I only read the first book. I read Scythe by Neil Shusterman. I think I'm saying that right. I did not think I was going to enjoy this book as much as I did. I kind of went into it without any expectations, but it seriously wowed me. I loved it so much. I gave it 5 stars. So this is a dystopian novel set in a world with no hunger, there's no war, there's no disease. They've even conquered death, so that's what the Scythes are for. Scythes are the only ones who can actually end life, and they're commanded to do so to keep the population under control, because nobody just dies naturally anymore in this world. It has to be at the hand of a Scythe. So our 2 main characters, Citra, I think I'm saying her name right. I don't know if I'm saying it wrong. You can roast me. Citra and Rowan are tasked to be apprentices to a Scythe, which neither of them want to do. They both have no interest in killing people, essentially. So they have to learn the art of killing, and if they don't, it kind of means that they are going to lose their own life, so they need to adapt to this change. This was really good. I really, really loved this book. 5 out of 5 stars for me. I cannot wait to read Thunderhead. I just haven't gotten around to it yet, but 2021, we will finish this series. So the next book that I read was Pieces of Her by Karen Slaughter. This I listened to as an audiobook and I did not like it that much. It was just kind of boring to me. It's about a woman kind of finds out that her mom was like a terrorist, I think. I don't even really remember, honestly. I don't have very much memory of it other than I remember listening to it on audio when I went back to work and we were like setting up my store, and I remember listening to the book being at work setting up the store. I gave it 3 stars. I don't have anything else to say about it. Next book that I read was Crooked Kingdom. This is part 2 of the Six of Crows duology, although I think it is a trilogy now. I think there's a 3rd book coming out. I don't know for sure. Part 2 of a series. I'm not really going to say much about it because I don't want to spoil the first book if anybody has not read it, but this was fantastic. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Loved it. I love this team of kind of like hooligans. I don't know, like I really love the team. I love Kaz and I love Inez. She's my favorite character. Great, great book, great series. Okay, the next book that I read was an audiobook as well. It was terrible, so I'm not really going to talk about it. It was called Big Shot. Listen, if you're going to listen to an audiobook, don't listen to a romance. Personally for me, not my thing. It was so cringe. I did not like it. I gave this book 2 stars. It might have been better if I was reading it as an actual book, but as an audiobook, I really could not deal with it. Yeah, no, not for me. Okay, finishing off this series, the Court of Mist and... Oh my god, why do I keep calling it the Court of Mist and Fury series? Court of Thorns and Roses series. I read this, like, it's like a novella, A Court of Frost and Starlight. It's kind of like the bridge between the last book and the 4th book, or 5th book, I guess, that is coming out this year. This is just about like a winter solstice and kind of gives you a little wrap up of the characters. This was really good. It was just a little novella. 4 out of 5 stars for me. Yeah, love this series. I think the series in itself, I would probably give 5 out of 5 stars right now because I just absolutely adore it. But yeah, that was this little guy. Then I got around to reading Before. This is the 5th book, I guess, in the After series. This one is told through Hardin's perspective kind of throughout the entire series, like from After to After We Collided and so on and so on. I think this was kind of pointless. This didn't really need to be written. I feel like there was just a lot of hype with the series at the time, so it was like, oh, let me just put out another book. But it just kind of went back to everything that we already knew. We learned a little bit more about some of the characters, but I just found it irrelevant, didn't really care about it. Yeah, 2 out of 5 stars. It was all right. Next, I read Normal People by Sally Rooney. This book was so hyped up. I was so excited to read it because I thought it was going to be fantastic. I didn't really think it was anything special. Nothing really happened. Like, there was no kind of climax or anything that really happened in it. I did enjoy the characters. Marianne, I really liked her character, but again, like, nothing was really happening. I don't know, I just felt it kind of boring. There was a lot of hype about it. Maybe that's why I didn't enjoy it as much as some other people, but I gave this one a 3 out of 5 stars. Okay, the next 3 books that I read, I listened to on audiobook. This was in the summer when I moved, and then I was like all caught up and I just wasn't making any time to read. But the next 3 that I read were audiobooks, and it was the Jesse Hunt series. It's like a thriller series. So the first one and the second one I really enjoyed. The third one, it just was kind of getting repetitive, so I stopped. But yeah, it was The Perfect Wife, The Perfect Block, and what was the third one? The Perfect House. So those were the 3 that I listened to on audiobook. They were really good to listen to on audiobook. They were super entertaining. It's about, like in the first one, we learn about the main character, whose name is Jessie Hunt. She's studying to be an FBI profiler. Her and her husband just moved to the suburbs, and then they go to this weird country club, and it's like all very secretive, and it ends up like the husbands just go there to like cheat on their wives, but then somebody gets murdered and there's this whole kind of situation that happens. But yeah, first one was really entertaining. I really liked the first one. I gave 4 out of 5 stars. Second one I gave 4 out of 5 stars, and then the third one I gave 3 out of 5 stars because I was just getting bored at that point, I think. But it's okay to listen to on audiobook. If you have like a long road trip, it'd be a perfect series just to blast through, because there's like 7 or 8 of them. Like, there's a lot of them. But yeah, it was alright. Okay, we're like halfway through the stack. We're making it. We're getting there. I'm so out of breath. I've never talked this much in my life. That's a lie. I love to talk, but it feels weird talking to the camera for this long. Do I look like an egghead today? Possibly. Back on track. The next book that I read was The Selection. This is another series. I only read the first book though. If you like The Bachelor, you'll definitely like this book. It's about 35 girls get selected for the selection to go and compete for Prince Maxon's heart, and then our main character, America Singer, gets selected to go, and her family's all really excited because it's this is also kind of a dystopian novel, but everyone is like a different level. So they get to go up a level, which means they get more money, they get more food, they get better housing because she's selected. But she does not want to go. She doesn't want to be selected. She's not excited for it. She's in love with somebody from her hometown who is a level below her. So then she ends up having to go meet Prince Maxon, and she doesn't want to be there. But then when she actually meets him, she finds out that he's actually a really nice guy, and it's like, oh, maybe I do like him, like maybe I do want to be the princess, but like, no, I still love Aspen. But it was very entertaining, so I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. I enjoyed it. I definitely will read the rest of the series because it was very entertaining and I want to know what happens next, but yeah, The Selection. The next book, I loved. I think I've said that with almost every book, but the next book, she's so beautiful too. A Song of Wraiths and Ruin. Absolutely adored this book. It was so good. I even annotated this one. I didn't annotate a lot this year, but I just needed to with this one because I think everybody should read this. It was amazing. It's a debut novel too. Amazing YA fantasy debut. Okay, so this book is about a festival. It's called the Solstice. Let's try that again. The Solstacia. Okay, I'm just not gonna say the name of the festival. We're just not gonna go there. We're just not gonna do that. The book is based on a festival, and these 3 siblings, Malik and his 2 sisters, go to the city called Zaran. Getting there is fine, but getting into the city is a different story. So Malik makes a deal with a very vengeful spirit to get into the city, but as payment for that, the spirit abducts his youngest sister. The spirit tells him that if he wants to get his sister back, he has to kill the princess of Zaran, which Malik is like, fine, I need my sister back, I'll do it. This book follows 2 narratives too, I guess I should have said that. So then we get into the narrative of Karina, who is the princess of Zaran, who Malik now has to kill. So Malik has to kill the princess of Zaran for his sister's freedom, but Karina has her own deadly aspirations. Her mother was just assassinated, and Karina, not knowing how to rule the kingdom, since she's the princess, she would now become the queen. She decides that she's going to resurrect her mother using very ancient, very dangerous magic, but the spell requires the heart of a king. So throughout the festival, there's a big competition, and Malik actually ends up rigging his way into the competition in order to get closer to the princess. Karina ends up saying that the prize for the winner is going to be her hand in marriage, so then she'll have a king, so she'll have a king's heart to resurrect her dead mother. They're both kind of set on a path to destroy each other. This book was so good. It was very entertaining. It was very fast-paced. The magic system was very different. I've never read anything like this before. Super strong debut. Highly recommend to anybody who loves YA fantasy. Definitely give this book a read. I can't remember if I said it, but that was 5 out of 5 stars for me. The next book that I read, Unpregnant, because I wanted to watch the movie. This book I gave 3 out of 5. It is pretty self-explanatory. It's about a girl. She's in high school. She is from a pretty religious family. She has a plan for her life, and she ends up getting pregnant. So she ends up getting pregnant. She can't really tell her family. She tells her boyfriend, and he's like, no, like, keep the baby, but she wants to go to university, and she has all these plans for her life, and in her mind, a baby is just not right now. So she decides that she's going to get an abortion, but the only place is in New Mexico. So this kind of like road trip begins with a long lost best friend. There's some really good friendship moments in here, but it just wasn't anything special for me. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. It was okay. The movie was super cute. I really liked the movie. Okay, the next book is my pride and joy, Foundry Side. This book was so good. Oh my gosh. Okay, let me just give you a super quick overview. So Foundry Side is about a thief who steals a very ancient, very powerful key. The magic system in this book is scribing. It's very kind of like techie magic. It was really cool. It was super different. Our main character, she's a thief, so she steals this key and then figures out that it's super powerful, and she has like this connection with the key. It's like a friendship, and it's very sweet. I absolutely loved it. It was great, but there's these merchant houses within the city that want the power for themselves so that they can change the world, essentially, through the scribing magic. So then there's like unlikely allies and unlikely friendships that form to go against the merchant houses so that they don't get this technology. It was really cool. This was a really cool book. I annotated this one as well because I just, like, my mind was blown when I was reading it. This was 5 out of 5 for me. It was amazing. I can't wait to read Shorefall. I have it on my shelf. I just haven't gotten to it yet. But yes, loved Foundry Side. I actually want to get a tattoo of the key, like of Clef, because I just loved this book so much, and it holds a special place in my heart now because it was so good. I absolutely loved it. All right, we are almost done. We're getting there. We have like 10 books left. We're getting there. So the next book that I read was Serpent Dove. This book was super overhyped. Let me just start by saying that this book was way overhyped. I saw this everywhere online. I mean, look at the cover. The cover is gorgeous, but I was expecting this to be like, wow, fantastic. It was okay. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. About an arranged marriage that happens very strangely. The way that the arranged marriage happened, I was like, this doesn't make sense. This is weird. Like, why is this your conclusion to solve this problem, is that they now have to get married? But anyways, they did. It's our 2 main characters. One of them is a witch. Her name is Lou. The other one, his name is Reed, and he's a chasseur for the church. And essentially the witches and the church hate each other. Reed's job essentially is to find witches and kill them. So now he has to get married to one. He doesn't know that Lou is a witch, but she's very independent and does her own thing and is not very happy being stuck with Reed now. So yeah, it's about the relationship and witches, and I really thought I was gonna like it because I like witches and stuff like that, but it was just okay. It wasn't anything spectacular for me. Okay, the next book that I read, I really was excited for when I purchased it, but then it just sat on my shelf and I had no desire to read it. That is The Ballad of Songwords and Snakes. I started this, I started the audiobook for this. I need to stop saying that is the worst habit that I have. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. So I started the audiobook for this, and then I was kind of going back and forth between the audiobook and the physical book. I thoroughly enjoyed this. This was really, really good. I didn't expect to like it as much as I did. I don't know why, because the Hunger Games series is amazing. One of my favorite series. We just won't talk about Mockingjay that much because this was really good. I loved the different perspective, seeing kind of how the Hunger Games transformed as to what it is in the actual Hunger Games books versus what it was back then was really, really good and really entertaining. I actually gave this a 4 out of 5 stars, which is way higher than I thought it was going to be. Like I said, I had no desire to read this, but it surprised me. It turned out being very, very good. The next book that I read, I don't actually have it here because I loaned it to one of my friends because I thought that she would enjoy it, and that was The Midnight Library. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. Like, between life and death, there is a library, and in the library, the shelves go on and on forever. Every book gives you a chance to live a life that you could have lived had you have made different choices, which that concept to me, I was like, this is so cool. Never read anything like this before. I think this is going to be really, really good. So then our main character, Nora, decides that she doesn't want to live anymore, so she decides to take her own life, and she ends up in the Midnight Library, kind of like this in-between space of life and death, and she gets to go through the different novels of different ways that her life could have gone had she made different choices. So she explores different versions of herself and sees if life is truly worth living and what makes it worth living in the first place. It was a very philosophical book, I think, when I was reading it. It was good, but 3 out of 5 stars for me. It was, I don't know, I just don't think it was my cup of tea, honestly. Next on the list is We Were Liars. I got this from a friend that I worked with. She said this book was amazing. It made her sob. It was so great. I was so excited to read it. And then halfway through, I guessed what was going to happen, and I guessed the major plot twist. It was written definitely different. It was pretty cool the way that it was written, I guess. It was a little bit of a different narrative for me, but I guessed what was going to happen halfway through, and didn't really come to a surprise for me, but it was okay. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. I feel like if I read this when I was in high school, if I was younger, this would have crushed me and I would have been obsessed with it, but yeah, I don't know. Now I just was kind of like, yeah, it was pretty good. Okay, the next book I read, this was for a book club that I'm in. We read it in October, and this was painful for me. So in the beginning when I was talking about how I had Audible for a month, that was for this book, and yeah, so that book is a discovery of witches. I know there is back and forth on this book. Some people absolutely love this series, and some people are in the same boat that I'm in. Okay, I will start by saying I started trying to read this, like, see, I have some tabs because I was annotating, and it was taking me forever. And I was like, there's no way I'm finishing this book in this month. Like, there's no way that it's happening. I'm not getting into it. I don't care about the characters. The author is describing things way too much, like just way too wordy, things that I don't need to know, things that I don't care about, things that none of us care about. It was just like, I'm making a cup of tea and I'm taking the cup from the cupboard and the cup looks like this and the cup goes on the counter and then we put the spoon in the cup and the sugar in the, and it was just too much. Like, there was too much happening. So listening to the audiobook, it was better. It was definitely easier to get through. As an audiobook, physical book, I was falling asleep. I gave this a 2 out of 5 stars just because it wasn't for me, but I read reviews and people were giving this 5 out of 5 stars. This was amazing. People loved it, so I don't know. It's kind of up to the reader, I guess, for this one, as with all books, but me and there was another girl in the book club who felt the same way that I did. Like, we both were just like, no, not for me. Yeah, it's about 3 kind of main supernatural creatures, witches, vampires, and demons, and then our 2 main characters, a witch and a vampire, cross paths, and there's a love story, and it's kind of like forbidden love. It's very historical too. The main character is a historian, so there's a lot of historical talk in this book. Yeah, just not for me. 2 out of 5 stars. Okay, the next book that I read, The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. I know that I just realized that I haven't been saying like any author's names. sorry about that. But The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett, I adored this book. It was so beautiful the way that it was written, and I think that I had like ties to it because I could relate to the characters. It's about a set of twins. My mom is a twin, and like the relationship that she has with my aunt, her sister, is very, very close and tight-knit, kind of like the sisters in the beginning of this book. They're very, very, very close, inseparable almost. So this book is about two twin sisters, Stella and Desiree. They grow up in a black community, a very small southern black community. It's actually a town, and everybody that lives there is light-skinned. They're not used to seeing super dark-skinned people, and they're not used to seeing white people. It's just a town of light-skinned people. And then when the girls are 16, they decide to run away, and they move to the city. When they get to the city, the sisters kind of drift apart, and they lead different lives. They end up disconnecting entirely. This spans through the 1950s to the 1990s, I think was like the time frame. So the sisters are disconnected. One of the sisters is back living in the town that she tried to escape with her black daughter, and the other one is living in a very suburban, very rich neighborhood with her white husband, and she's passing as white. Her husband doesn't even know. Everybody just thinks she's a white woman because of her light skin complexion. She can pass as a white woman. This book talks about race, identity, gender, so much representation. This book was amazing. I don't have enough good things to say about it. I absolutely loved it. The two sisters, Stella and Desiree, their daughters' storylines kind of intersect because it takes you through this whole kind of generational thing, and it shows us the choices that we have can affect future generations. This book was really good. I really loved this. Definitely, definitely, definitely one of my favorites of the year. 5 out of 5 stars for me, hands down. Next book that I read was a poetry book. I read September Love by Lang Liev. I really loved, what was it called? Love and Misadventure by Lang Liev. Really, really loved that book, so I thought I was really gonna like this one. It was okay. I gave it a 2 out of 5 stars. I do have some tabbies because there was a couple poems or just lines that I really liked or that I connected with, but I don't think it was anything special. I read it in like an hour, like it was just a one sit read. So I don't know. If you like poetry, give it a try, I guess. I don't think I would buy the physical copy because it was $23, and I don't think that I liked it enough to have spent $23 on it, but besides the point. Next book I also don't have because I loaned it to a friend of mine. It was The Silent Patient. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I went through this little phase where all I wanted to read was thrillers in the last couple months. This one did not disappoint. It was so good. So throughout this book, we're following the narrative, I guess, of a psychologist who is treating a patient. Her name's Alicia. She killed her husband, shot him in the face, I think it was like 3 times, killed him, and which is crazy. And then she decides not to speak. She just goes mute. She doesn't want to talk to anybody. She's not talking to anybody. She hasn't said anything since the night of the murder. So the psychologist is saying, I will get her to talk. Like, I know that I can do this. So he starts treating her as a patient, and then it's very twisty, very turny. The twist at the end, it was so good. Yeah, definitely read it. 4 out of 5 stars for me. If you're into thrillers, definitely read it. It was really good. Where is my Redford Morgan? Because I need him. Okay, Get a Life, Chloe Brown was the next book that I read. I love this book so much. Oh, it was so freaking cute. Redford Morgan is the love of my life, and I need him in my life, and I think I'm gonna get a tattoo of a button because of this book, because it was just, it was so cute. It was so good. I loved it. So this is just a romance novel. It is about our main character here, Chloe Brown. She's kind of nerdy. She makes this Get a Life list. She moves out of her parents' house, moves into her own apartment, and she has this list of things that she wants to do because she feels like she hasn't done anything. She is sick also. That's like, I guess that's a point. I think she's fibromyalgia. I think that's what she has. So anyway, she wants to be independent. She has this list of things she wants to do. It's like enjoy a drunken night out, ride on the back of a motorcycle, have meaningless sex. I don't remember the rest of it, but do something bad was one of them. So she has this list, and then she moves into this apartment, and the superintendent, our lovely Redford Morgan here, he ends up helping her with this list, and it's kind of like an enemies to lovers. Oh, it was just so cute. It was just so good. I really, really loved this book. 5 stars for me. Oh my gosh, we're almost at the bottom of the stack. Next book was another thriller that, Sharp Objects. Whoa. Whoa. I don't even know what I can say, because this book freaking blew my mind. 5 out of 5 stars. I also watched the show, which was done very, very well. HBO did a limited series for this. This book's about our main character. Her name's Camille. She goes back to her hometown because girls are getting murdered. I think it was 2 girls were murdered in the span of like a year or 2. And she's a reporter, so she's going back to her hometown to report on it. Yeah, I don't want to say anything because I don't want to spoil it, because this was so good. Oh my gosh, this was so good. Yes, definitely read this. Read Sharp Objects. Read Sharp Objects. And then watch the show, because the show was really good. 5 out of 5 stars for me. Next ones are 2 little short guys, because I was getting really close to the end of the month and I needed to hurry up and finish my reading goal. First 2 books in the Chronicles Narnia series. I've never read this series. Watched the movie, absolutely loved it. So I bought the box set a while ago, and yeah, these are 2 short ones. I don't have much to say. They were fantastic. They're great. Like, I don't really have anything else to say about them. They were great. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have anything really to say about them. They're really awesome. They were great little short reads, and they were super entertaining, so I could fly through them. But yeah, I'm definitely going to continue with this series for the rest of 2021. Hopefully I can finish the whole thing, because they're not, like I said 1,000 times, they're short and they're not super long. But yeah, I gave both of these 4 out of 5 stars. Great. What the heck? What the hell? What in the world is what I have to say about this. Second last book of the year that I read was I'm Thinking of Anythings by Ian Reid. This book scared the shit out of me when I first started reading it, and I was like, I'm not gonna be able to get through this because I'm freaked out. But then as I kept going on, it got a little less spooky and a little bit more like a thriller. So this is about a woman who is going on a road trip with her boyfriend. They haven't been dating for very long, but the whole time she's thinking about ending things. Like, she just doesn't want to be with him anymore. They haven't been together for a very long time, like 6 weeks, I think it said in the book. So she's like, why am I going on this road trip? Because they're going to the middle of nowhere to meet his family at their farmhouse. And then she gets there and his family is really weird, and lots of weird things start happening. And then they take a weird detour, and then she ends up abandoned in a high school by herself, and someone in the high school is trying to murder her. Yeah, it was very much like a mindfuck. I am interested to watch the movie on Netflix because they made a movie about it. But yeah, I still think about this book and I'm like, what did I just read? Like, what was that? I gave this a 3.5 out of 5 stars. It was strange. And my last book of the year was a great way to finish the year. I read Such a Fun Age. So in this book, a late night crisis happens to this lady named Alex. She is a white woman. She's a blogger. She has a babysitter named Amira who is black. So she calls Amira and asks her to take their daughter to the grocery store. While Amira's at the grocery store, she gets interrogated by a security guard and accused of kidnapping Briar, the little girl. I loved the way that it ended. I thought it wrapped up really, really well. Highly recommend this book to everybody. I think that everybody should read this book, really. It was eye-opening in a lot of ways for me too. I really loved it. 4.5 out of 5 stars for me. That's it. So yeah, those are my 50 books that I read this year. I'm super proud of myself for setting a goal. My original goal was 40 actually, and then through quarantine I was like, I can read more than 40. Let's go for 50. And I'm really happy that I pushed through and I actually did it. I know this is a very different video for my channel. We don't do stuff like this here, but I just wanted to put that out there. And thank you if you have stayed this long and watched the whole video. Thank you for being here. Thank you for making it out of 2020. And here is to 2021 and a better year than the last one. Hopefully more YouTube videos this year as well. If we liked this style video, this like reading kind of book recommendation, what I read style video, you can let me know, shoot me a message, and I'd be happy to do more of those because reading is what I do with 80% of my time.